Jake Sully, a disabled. He awakens on a massive spaceship en route to Pandora, a densely forested Earth-like moon orbiting Polyphemus. He is one of many travelers who have awakened after nearly 6 years of cryosleep, en route to Pandora. As he drifts out of his sleeping pod in 0G, Jake tells us that he had a deceased twin brother, Tom, a scientist, who was to be part of a high-level initiative controlled by corporate and military planners to investigate Pandora's environment and population. Because Jake and his brother are genetically identical, he was provided with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Take up his brother's contract with a corporate military entity and go light years away to an outpost on the previously seen world, Pandora. Jake is one of several soldiers and civilians set to land on Pandora, who are being brought from the spaceship. As Jake mulls over his new duty, we see the base and its development, as well as massive mining machinery digging up the soil in a big quarry. The passengers are all advised to wear full-face breathing masks because the planet's atmosphere will not support human life. 20 seconds of exposure to the planet's deadly atmosphere produces unconsciousness, with death occurring 4 minutes later, while the other passengers depart and take their first steps onto the base, which is known as Hell's Gate, and is ringed by a massive perimeter fence. Jake follows in his wheelchair. Jake rushes to a military meeting where Colonel Miles Quaritch is addressing the assembled soldiers and a few civilians. He informs them that they are no longer in Kansas, and he tells them about Pandora's indigenous people, the Na'vi. Quaritch claims they are hard to kill and that everything out there will try to kill you. He goes on to say that if they want to survive, they must obey Pandora rules. Jake visits a research lab and meets scientist Norm Spellman and Dr. Max Patel, 2 Avatar program members. Jake gets his first sight at his own avatar. Humans are unable to breathe Pandora's air, but the avatar program allows a human to link with their own avatar. Jake will be able to walk and breathe in his virtual body once more, as Dr. Grace Augustine, the program's science lead, awakens in a specially engineered pod that connects her to her avatar. Norm informs Jake that she prefers plants over people. She tells him that she needs his brother Tom, the PhD who trained for the Pandora trip for 3 years, but she doesn't need Jake because Jake has no lab experience and has never been attached to an avatar. Grace Storms gets out to the control room of the facility to meet Parker Selfridge. He is the base commander and representative for the Resources Development Administration, a corporation that governs all military and civilian workers on the colony. He informs her that Jake will be her team's security escort while on the planet's surface. She doubts that how Jake can help her with her botanical studies. Parker responds that they lucked out with Jake because he is a perfect genetic match for his twin brother's avatar. Toward the overall goal of the operation, mining the mineral unobtainium that sells for many millions of dollars per kilo. The next morning, Jake and Norm are linked to their avatars for the first time. Jake, as his avatar, awakens in a different room with other avatars and employees. Within a few moments, Jake dismisses him and storms out of the room into the sunlight. He finds himself in a leisure area where other avatars are playing sports and employees are conducting various chores while wearing protective gear. Jake meets Grace's avatar, who is more patient than human Grace, and accompany Jake to the barracks, where he is eventually encouraged to relax. Jake examines his neural queue, a long appendage that resembles a hair braid, before falling asleep. A clump of concealed tendrils is at the end of his queue. When the avatar falls asleep, the bond is broken, and Jake awakens. Later, Jake meets Trudy Chaikin, a veteran Marine pilot with whom he will spend several weeks familiarizing himself with his avatar and exploring Pandora. Jake meets with Colonel Quaritch, who is weightlifting. The colonel informs Jake that he has reviewed his military record and is impressed by what he accomplished on some of his tours, including one in Venezuela. Jake is warned by the colonel about the dangers that await him in Pandora. He also expresses his conviction that the avatar program is a joke, but it does provide an opportunity for a unique reconnaissance mission. If Jake can find out and tell the colonel what he wants to know about the natives, the colonel will make sure that Jake gets the surgery he needs to regain use of his legs. The colonel climbs into an amp suit, a bipedal exoskeleton used for missions on Pandora, and walks away. Jake, reconnected with his avatar, flies across Pandora's surface aboard Trudy's gunship, along with Grace, Norm, and others. The team lands in a wilderness, where Grace and Norm begin collecting flora samples and taking measurements. Jake becomes distracted by his surroundings and stumbles into a field of helicoradian flowers. Suddenly Jake gets into a trouble. Jake is in front of a Titanothere, a powerfully armored, hammer-wielding creature. Grace tells him to stand quiet and not shoot, otherwise the animal would become enraged and charge. range, guns have no effect on him because his armor is too thick. Jake is able to hold his ground only because another beast, a panther-like Thanator, has approached him from behind, causing the Titanotheres to retreat and circle their young. The Thanator then moves his gaze to Jake. Grace tells him to flee, and the Thanator pursues him, separating Jake from his group. He loses his rifle and is taken down by the animal, but he is able to rescue himself by releasing his backpack. The chase eventually brings Jake to a waterfall, where he dives to safety, leaving the Thanator howling above him. Jake's crew looks for him, but Trudy says they must return to base because night operations are not permitted. Grace claims he won't make it through the night. It's now nighttime. Jake is being pursued by a pack of viper wolves. He immerses the tip of his spear in a flammable pitch-like liquid. He fires the end and uses it as a torch against the viper wolves. The animals assault Jake. He fights back, killing some before being overpowered by others. The archer who had been watching Jake joins the fight on his side. She kills some viper wolves and drives the others away. She lovingly puts several sobbing wounded animals out of their pain and prays for them. Jake tries to thank her. She scorns his thanks and tells him that everything is his fault, that they did not have to die. Jake seeks to follow his rescuer up into a tree, asks for her assistance, and expresses his want to learn. He is disgusted and instructed to return, as sky people cannot be taught. The Iwa seeds reappear and begin to land on the frightened Jake. He inquires as to what they are. Very pure spirits, she responds. When the seeds float away, she relents and invites him to accompany her. Jake is caught by a bolo thrown by an Amatikayan warrior patrol. Jake is introduced to Natiri's parents, the king and queen of the tribe, Achikin and Mott. Jake informs the elders that he is a warrior, and he wishes to learn from them. Mott pricks Jake's chest and tastes his blood, declaring that it is Iwa's desire for him to live with the Amatikaya and for Natiri. However, reluctantly, to teach him their ways and customs, Jake is transported to his bed after a traditional gathering, a leaf high up in the home tree. Human Jake gets reawakened as he falls asleep. At morning chow, all of the scientists, including Grace, are listening intently to everything Jake says. Jake appears to be their best hope at getting the Amatikaya to move or advising the colonel on how to force them to do so, because Hometree sits on a vast deposit of unobtainium. He is told that he has 3 months to complete his task before the bulldozers arrive. The next scenes focus upon Avatar Jake's training with Natiri. Human Jake continues to report on the infrastructure of the Hometree, as well as other Navi specifics. Jake informs the colonel and Selfridge about the Amatikaya's home, the massive Hometree. It has a significant amount of unobtainium. She transports them to the Hallelujah Mountains. This is intercut with scenes of his continuous training with Natiri. Natiri tells him that he is ready for a vital rite of passage, bonding with and riding a Declan, a flying mountain banshee. Jake must accompany Natiri. Several variables make this a perilous lesson, but Jake's lack of fear and successful bond with his banshee gain him the grudging respect of the Navi warriors there, including Sudi. He forms a relationship with the tendrils in his queue. Back at Hometree, the colonel approaches him and informs him that his assignment has been completed and that he will return to Earth the next day. Jake intends to postpone his departure because he believes he is about to be inducted into the tribe and accepted as one of them, at which point he will be able to negotiate with the Navi to relocate. The colonel agrees. Jake attends a Navi ritual. Natiri takes Jake to the Tree of Voices, a place of worship where they utilize their cues to bond with the tree. Jake is told by Natiri that he can construct a bow from the tree, and that he can choose a woman. Jake informs Natiri that he has already chosen her, and she responds that she has also chosen him. Jake wakes up in the lab after they sleep together under the tree. Natiri is awakened in the morning by falling trees, followed by the presence of bulldozers, as the jungle crumbles around Natiri, who is dragging and carrying Jake to safety. And when he finally awakens, he gets aboard one of the bulldozers and attempts to stop it, eventually breaking its camera system and attracting gunfire. Other Navi warriors arrive, and the colonel, who is watching movies back at the base, identifies Jake in his avatar form as the one who attempted to stop their mission. The Navi desire war on Hometree. Grace and Jake are opposed to it. There is a heated argument. Sudi attempts to murder Jake after learning that Jake and Natiri are bonded for life. Jake asserts that he is a Navi and thus has the right to speak. Suddenly, soldiers arrive to the pod location and disconnect the link. Jack says that the tribe will not leave Amatikaya in a video log, and Colonel see it. Parker and the colonel talk about their alternatives. He plans to launch an attack on Hometree and use gas bombs to drive the Na'vi away. Jake requests permission to return to the Amaticaya and persuade them to leave, and he is given 1 hour to do so. Jake and Grace are not invited to return. Jake is rejected by Neytiri. Jake and Grace have both been chained and abandoned by the Amaticaya. Massive flying ship. The ship fires gas into Hometree. As the conflict progresses, the majority of the firepower is directed towards the root structure of Hometree. By a barrage of explosions and heavy artillery, the tree gets destroyed, and many Amaticaya are slaughtered. Mott requests Jake and Grace to save the tribe. When he tries to console Neytiri, Neytiri's father is murdered by a massive piece of shrapnel. His dying request is for Neytiri to carry his sacred bow and lead their people. Jake and Grace return to their human bodies and are swiftly arrested for treason. Trudy enters the cell containing Jake, Grace, and Norm. She attacks the security guard and helps to escape from prison. Grace is shot and wounded by the colonel as they prepare to depart the base. Trudy's spacecraft is flown to the distant facility in the floating mountains, and the team takes a pod to another location in the forest. Jake regains control of his avatar body. The anticipated reunion with the Amaticaya is not to be. Jake is an outcast, a stranger, so he makes a risky decision. He knows that in order to win the Navi's trust, he decides to go in search of Torek. Jake believes that the Torek never seeks an attack above himself. Jake leaps from his Banshee to the back of the Torek. He next appears riding the Torek at the Tree of Souls during an Omatikayan ceremony. Jake has formed a strong bond with the Torek. Sudi, the tribe's new leader, accepts Jake's new duty as Torek Mado. He holds Jake in high regard. Jake persuades Mott to assist Grace, who is dying. Mott starts the preparations. Grace's consciousness will be permanently transferred to her avatar. The ceremony fails, but Grace tells Jake before she dies that she has seen Awa. Jake declares that it is time to send a message to the Sky People that this is the time to fight as one against human. Sudi will be the new Omatikayan clan head and will assist unite other clans to fight alongside them. The human military has noticed an increase in the number of Na'vi in the area. The colonel explains to his troops, the Na'vi will soon number 20,000 and their perimeter will be overwhelmed. Rather than allowing that to happen, they must launch a preemptive strike while they still have the opportunity. Their idea is to convert a space shuttle into a huge bomb transport. The Tree of Souls is their goal, and the attack is scheduled for the following day. Jake uses his power to join with the Tree of Souls and begs Awa to investigate Grace's memories, emphasizing that people killed their mother, Earth. Neytiri appears and informs Jake that Awa is impartial. The bomb ship and the armada are making their way toward the Tree of Souls. The combined Na'vi force begins to descend from the skies and land. Jake, Sudi, and other warriors engage in combat with military aircraft, mostly Scorpion attack ships, on both sides. Casualties are mounting. Trudy arrives and opens fire on the colonel's command ship. Neytiri's Banshee is shot down and killed. Sudi takes on the bomb ship and is killed in the attempt. Trudy dies when her ship is destroyed in a hail of gunfire from Quaritch's dragonfly. Neytiri watches this action from the ground. Meanwhile, the bomb ship closes in on the Tree of Souls. Jake instructs Neytiri to leave the fight through communicator. A Titanotheres, Pandora's heavily armored dinosaur-like beasts, attacks on the soldiers. They easily kill infantry and soldiers wearing amp suits. Neytiri rejoins the fight, overjoyed that Awa has heard Jake's appeal for help, with many other Pandoran species following her. When a Thanator approaches nearby, it bows submissively to her. Jake and his Torek take to confront the bomb ship. Jake throws a grenades on the bomb ship as he approaches from above. It bursts into flames and explodes far away from the Tree of Souls. Jake also detonates explosives in thrusters of the command ship. It starts to burn and crashes. Colonel Quaritch wears an amp suit and leaves off the command ship before it explodes. Jake's inside is avatar pod at the camp. Quaritch, tried to killing Jake, is immediately assaulted by a Thanator with whom Neytiri had formed a relationship and ridden to the location. The colonel kills the Thanator using his amp suit, trapping Neytiri. Jake appears in his avatar before the colonel has a chance to kill Neytiri. When Jake smashes the suits, it breaks front shield of suit, and then Colonel pops it off and puts on a breathing mask and move towards to destroy the structures that hold the pods, and then he smashes into the mobile lab in search of Jake's pod, intending to destroy it and human Jake. The war continues. Jake is caught by an amp suit arm and Colonel try to kill Jack by his knife. Meanwhile, Neytiri has almost escaped. Neytiri suddenly fires an arrow at the colonel, penetrating inside his center of a chest. The colonel is shaken. Neytiri's second arrow connects with the first. It knocks the colonel. However, the facility has suffered significant damage and is now leaking into the planet's deadly atmosphere. Human Jake is awake, but having trouble breathing and putting on a mask. Neytiri appears and helps Jake to wear his mask. Back at Hell's Gate, the majority of the remaining humans are being marched aboard a shuttle to be sent to Earth. However, a few Earth citizens, including Norm and Dr. Patel, are invited to stay on Pandora. Jake signs out in his farewell video log, where we learn that he has decided to permanently transfer his consciousness to his avatar. Jake walks through the Eye of Awa and awakens in his avatar.